Welcome to In Their Voices. Today I have the joy to talk with Hansa Patel of San Francisco. Welcome, Hansa.
Thank you, Michael. Thanks for having me here today.
You're quite welcome. Say just a little bit about your background and who you are, and then we'll begin our conversation.
Sure. Who am I? That's something I'm still trying to figure out, Michael. It might take a while still, but it seems a changing thing all the time. A little background, my parents are Indian and they immigrated to England, and I was born there, but I've lived in San Francisco my whole life. I consider myself a native. I've been here since I was 3. And I come from a very traditional Indian Gujarati family. And at some point I decided I was going to law school, which was a big deal for my parents and our family, because we come from a tradition where women usually, focused more on marriage and raising families. So that was a big struggle with our family, that I wanted to go to grad school. Ultimately, my dad was very proud, and my mom. And I practiced juvenile dependency law in San Francisco for nearly 14 years. And then I had kids, and lots of things changed. My focus changed. My perspective on the world changed, really, Michael. And I really realized that I was struggling with our legal system and what outcomes I were getting for my clients and what it was doing to my mind and body, and if that was the kind of contribution I wanted to give or continue giving. And then I had to ask myself, well, what do I want to give in this lifetime to my children? And is that what I'm giving to the community I serve at work? And I realized that what I want to give my kids is what I should give at work. Why was it any different? And for me, that was my mindfulness background that my parents had exposed me to, this internal tool that I have that my parents really gave me the greatest gift. I want my kids to have that. And when I serve juvenile dependency families, I realized that the legal advocacy I was giving them was not giving them the joy or the happiness that I wanted for them, or the outcomes I wanted for them. So I really discovered that I want to give the same tools that I give my kids to my former clients and the people I work with. And so that really led me to wrap up my juvenile dependency practice. It took some time off, and I started really exploring my love for mindfulness, my love to meditate, my love to do yoga, but to really just reflect, pause a little bit, and think about where I want to go and where I am, instead of always reacting to what's happening on the outside. And that led me to mediation training about how to work with conflict, how to have difficult dialogue of conversations, even with what the world is happening today with medical crisis, or racial crisis right now, or economic crisis. And so that also led me to discover how mediation is really connected to mindfulness, about how we do a lot of self-reflection, like your book talks about. It really makes me think about how I'm engaging with other people. And even though on the surface it seems like I'm trying to resolve someone with working through their conflict, it's really actually benefiting me more than anybody else about how I deal with my own internal conflict, you know, and making growth and changes for me. And then that also led me to my new adventure right now on becoming a mindfulness teacher for lawyers. I'm in the middle of my year-long training right now at Warrior One, and it gives me tools on how to work with lawyers and our legal community in a way I've never considered. To not be adversarial and to be able to work together mindfully, it's pretty amazing. So I'm hoping that I will be able to become a different person with all these tools on how I practice law, how I engage with people. So that's who I am today. Lots of room still for growth, but yeah, that's where I am right now.
And I'm really I want to ask a little bit about, if you don't mind, sort of to separate two different aspects of mindfulness or paths of mindfulness in a way. One is what you learned in your family. What are the values or the because you talked about mindfulness within your own, something that you learned within your family or you felt came from. How would you describe that to somebody who says, okay, well, Hansa, what do you mean by that? What do you mean that your family gave you something?
I think when I think back, well, one of the things my parents really always gave me was that no matter what noise we have externally, that no matter how painful things are on the outside, we really still have to hold on to our honesty, our integrity, and always choosing to do what's right. It's how we engage with one another, how we connect with the world. So I think those are the things that I feel like I learned as a child from my parents about how you have to be mindful about what's happening in the world, what's happening in your life, and then decide how you want to interact and engage. And yeah, I think that's how I would describe it.
Yeah, and you do that from the point of view of having an honest self-examination of what are your values, what are your beliefs, what are your traditions, what are the guiding principles that shape the way in which you experience and interact with the world.
Absolutely. Yeah. I think that to think that we are not going to take a pause and think about what's important to us and how we want to coexist, and have kind of a knee-jerk reaction all the time to life is not healthy.
Yeah. I want to ask a little bit about the training that you're doing and mindfulness training for lawyers. But I want to make an observation and see if this holds for you. As you talked about mindfulness, that one of the things that comes with that, as I understand it, is a sense of confidence about one's own place. It doesn't mean ego. It doesn't mean self-aggrandizing. It means self-assurance. And that being in the midst of conflict, which is what we as mediators do, if we have that, we're able to separate out what's our concerns, what may trouble us internally, from what's happening with the people we're working with. Is that an accurate how you see it as well?
Absolutely, because I think before there's so much chatter that happens in our mind, right? And half the time, at least for me, 90%, I'm in my head more than I am with whatever's happening in the world. And so if I can quiet down and just observe that chattering that's happening in my head, then I can distinguish what's happening in around me, you know, and then even maybe create some space in my mind for what's happening for someone else, you know, or what's happening in their lives, but what feelings or thoughts they're having. And I don't project my own issues, my own opinions, my bias, my judgments onto them. If I can separate mine and hold on to mine for mine, then there's more room for me to be curious about what's happening for the other person. And it allows me to be present and to listen, you know, in a way that I wouldn't be able to do if I can't be aware of what's happening for me, right? Like,
Yeah.
to separate that.
And you know, I'm, you know, from our prior conversations and other things, that curiosity is, to me, is a really fundamental attribute of a highly capable practitioner. And what you're describing is a curiosity that is about the other, about what matters to the people you're working with. It isn't sort of a voyeuristic inquiry. It's not like a lawyer examining or cross-examining a witness to gather information or truth or whatever we might call it. It's a curiosity about who are these people who have come to me to ask for my assistance in helping them address something that's troubling in their work, their lives, their experience.
Absolutely. You know, the curiosity part is really important because it allows me to stay open to really listen to what they're experiencing in that moment, you know, or with that conflict. And then it allows me to figure out a little bit why this conflict might have arisen, you know, to understand conflict, you know, the history behind it. There's always something deeper than just what's on the surface, right, of that conflict.
Sure. You know, I was thinking as you were talking about one of my early experiences when what you just described, that quieting of the inner voice, so important. When I was first doing mediation, the clients who were coming to me were fairly easy to work with. They came usually as a couple because they said, we know that there's a different way. We're not going to be bashing each other verbally. We're not going to be trying to get every last penny or every last second with the kids. And we want to do something. And that was, so those early experiences for me were wonderful. And then came a couple, and I can remember where I was sitting. I can remember who they were, whose names will remain confidential, of course. And I can remember when they started raising their voices. I mean, really shouting at each other. A little bit of finger pointing, but mostly it was the volume of conversation in the room suddenly just went up. And this little kid inside me said, what am I doing here? Get me out of this room. I don't know the first thing about this. Because I'd grown up in a family where, you know, I know that my parents had disagreements, but we never really heard them. We never heard arguments, fights. People didn't, you know, raise their voices very much. Nobody, you know, slammed their fist onto a table in anger or frustration. And here were these people, and I had no clue what I was supposed to do until I figured out that this wasn't about me. I didn't matter.
Yes.
Right.
This is why I love mediation, because you don't really matter. You know, even though the parties might think you're going to help them, they're going to really help themselves. They have the tools to figure it out all by themselves. I am simply there to observe, really, or you know, sort of facilitate the conversation, but I'm not the one who's going to resolve this. It's them. It's 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 wonderful, and it's very lightheartening too, to think that I don't have to sit there and try to solve this, because they already have the tools. They can do this, you know, and they just need to be reminded that they can do this.
Right. And that's one of the things that we can offer, I think, is a sense of a reminder of their capacity to do this, that they're not incapable people, that they have been through difficult things before, they've been through happy things before, they've figured stuff out for themselves. They are, however old they are, whatever they're 20, 30, 40, 50, 60, doesn't matter, that they've been through life and they've managed to navigate that life pretty successfully.
Yeah, I think that when people need to just be reminded of that, you know, sometimes it gets so noisy, or an issue becomes so noisy, or the situation becomes so noisy that their emotions take over and they can't step back and take a look and observe from a distance. But I truly believe that everyone has the capacity to resolve their own conflict and work through it. They just need some space and quietening down what's happening, you know, and just a reminder sometimes that they can do it. They've done it before in the past, and they will continue to do it tomorrow.
And it doesn't mean that there's nothing for us to do. We're not just conveners. We don't just provide a room and, you know, and fresh water and tissues for if somebody cries, and some comfortable chairs to sit in. We do much more than that.
Absolutely. Yeah. I think you know, they come to mediation for a reason, right? Because they need someone to help that dialogue happen, to have reasonable communication or compassionate space where they can share each other's stories or concerns. And they need someone to guide them through that dialogue, you know, or to see, lift some of the fog that's there maybe. No, I think that it's still a very valuable tool. I don't want to dismiss that in any way. Yeah.
And so let's talk a little bit about the other path of mindfulness. One part was the gift of being in your family and what you experienced and learned from being a member of your family and from your folks. But what about the Warrior One process that you're going through, the training? How did you even come to think about studying this and learning about it and potentially then incorporating it in your practice?
I can't say there's any one magical thing. You know, I think that for me, I realized that working with child welfare cases and experiencing a lot of vicarious trauma over my own work as their attorney for kids or parents, that I needed an outlet, you know, to kind of recenter myself before I get back to work. And when I first started my law practice, someone had said to me in the office, every 3 months, someone has to go on vacation. And I thought, wow, I really like that idea. I like the idea of vacationing every 3 months. And then I learned over years that it is essential to do the practice we were doing to actually take a break, you know, and digest what's happening for yourself. And it's a little bit like the reflective practice we're talking about, you know. And so I started taking these breaks, and I ended up always towards some kind of mindful meditation, some kind of yoga retreat. And that was what was calming me, centering me, sort of keeping my resiliency going. And then at some point I realized, well, when I had the kids, I couldn't take off every 3 months. I had to figure out something else now. So I started doing my own daily meditations. And then after being off for 2 years and being with the kids, I came across an ADR class that was being taught with a mindfulness class at Hastings. And someone said to me, you know, you should come check this out. And I thought, all right, I want to learn more about mindfulness in the legal system. So I went. Little did I know that it was with the ADR group. And I was like, well, why are they here? And why are they the only ones here, you know? And then one thing led to another, and someone introduced me to Judy Cohen, who runs the Warrior One program. And I was super fascinated that there was a program for mindfulness and lawyers. Like, wow, where have they been hiding? And I want to be there today, but I discovered that they only do this certification every 2 years. And I was like, what? I got to wait a whole year? So I waited because I didn't have a choice. And it was a big financial commitment, especially when I wasn't working. But I really wanted to do it. And then I ended up meeting somebody else at this wellness/ADR program who was a social worker / lawyer who was doing also mindfulness work in the East Coast. So I did a training there at the JAMS program. And then it just started keep happening where I met the founder of Warrior One, Judy Cohen, at another retreat in Hawaii, the Ram Dass retreat. She was there before even the program started, so that was fabulous. And so it just kind of unfolded on its own. And clearly nothing happens for a reason. And I was very happy the way it unfolded. And yeah.
I'm curious to know, because it sounds as though as part of who you are and how you grew up, and then what you brought as a practitioner, you were already practicing a sort of mindfulness that is to separate yourself from what's happening outside of you, not disconnecting from it, but accepting that the limits of what you could do in a way, and the importance of being honest within yourself. Is that a fair, simple summary? Because it sounds as though you sort of come to this with this already part of your personality, part of your practice.
You know, I think some parts of it, Michael, to be honest with you, I think that the idea of being mindful every 3 months, you know, and there was kind of a separation between what I did at home with my family. I felt like I did kind of still, to a certain extent, live a dual life with my traditional Asian family at home versus what I do in the professional world, you know. And sometimes the cultures clash and sometimes they don't. But this idea that I would do this sort of take a break, you know, and regroup or do some self-reflection every 3 months was wonderful. But I realized I wanted more than that. I wanted not just self-reflection for myself, but I wanted these tools to be available to everybody in the public. Like, you know, it's lovely to go on these retreats that cost a lot of money, but I realized I'm fortunate enough to be able to pay for that, you know, and go. And I want these tools to be available to everybody, including the person who can't pay $100 to sit in a mindfulness class, you know. And they completely change who I am and what I do. And so to think that my clients don't have that option, at least to even consider a tool, is sad for me. I want to make sure that it's a tool that's available to them, but then it's a tool that I use in everything I do, not just something I do on vacation.
Let's talk about what is that tool for you? How would you describe it to somebody? Because you've used the word tool to describe it as though it's something that one can learn and that one can utilize on a regular basis. So what is the tool that you're talking about that you'd like to see available to everyone?
I think there's a lot of tools out there, and yes, anybody can learn them, and it's about practicing them, and they're not complicated, and they don't take a lot of time. Some of those tools can be just taking a pause. Sometimes it could just mean I'm gonna take a walk without my cell phone, without my music, just be present with what's happening in your body, in your mind. And for me, it's being silent and doing meditation. For some people, it could be yoga. For some people, it could be a walking meditation. For me, the number one tool is self-reflection that happens when you meditate, when you're calm, and it settles your emotions or makes you aware of them. It allows me to be just with myself and to listen to me.
Because for somebody listening to this, watching us have this conversation, the idea of taking a break, for example, let's just take it as in terms of mediation practice. Mm-hmm. Getting up from the table, mm-hmm. Separating yourself from the situation, getting a cup of tea or coffee or a glass of water, walking around the room or stepping outside for a couple of minutes. That's taking a break. What you're talking about, I think, is a purposeful process that's involved in taking that break. That it isn't just separating yourself from something that's happening in the moment. It's not just disconnecting from the energy, the experience, the interactions that are going on in front of you. You're doing something purposeful as part of separating yourself from that moment, right?
Absolutely, yeah. It's definitely purposeful, right? You're not just getting up to go get a cup of coffee, or in mediations where we take a break, right, to collect ourselves, but you're purposely taking a break so that you can reflect a little bit on what you're feeling, what you might be thinking, what you might be confusing or distracted with. It's a purposeful break to not to do anything really. Right? The idea is the opposite. When getting up and getting a coffee, you're purposely taking a break to do nothing.
Because many people, when they take a break, what they do is that they're sitting or standing, walking, and they're planning what's going to happen next. They're strategizing. They're thinking, okay, here's where I am in this mediation. Here's what I think I should do next. I need to talk to this person and ask these kinds of questions and so on. That for that person, taking a break means that they are stepping away from that experience in the moment so that they don't have to pay attention to the interaction and they can just think for themselves. My sense is that you're talking about something that's a little different from stepping away from the table in order to strategize.
Absolutely. We're not taking a break so we can plan or to process. It's more about creating a sense of silence, right, with what's happening. It's almost like we're gonna pause the movie that's playing right now. We're just gonna pause it. You know, it's not like I'm not trying to figure out, hey, what's gonna happen in that movie next? You know, how is this movie gonna end? It's about pausing it for a minute, really, to figure out, how am I feeling right now? How am I maybe feeling about this movie right now? And why am I feeling that way? And how did I arrive at this feeling?
Mm-hmm.
You know? And that's it. You're not really moving forward, you know, you're just trying to be in that moment.
It seems to me, and maybe this is terribly simplistic, so you'll correct me and embellish from my very simple-minded approach here. One of a distinction that I see or hear is that, and we're not saying that taking a break in order to strategize isn't a good idea sometimes. That's not, this is not
No,
criticized.
of course not.
No.
Yeah. We need that.
Absolutely. We're just distinguishing taking a break for a different purpose.
Yes.
And in the break that you're talking about, the time that's spent is about you, not about them. And is that the difference?
I think that's a very important difference, right? With the kind of break I'm talking about taking, where you are with yourself, you're being more connected to who you are at this moment, what you're processing, what you're feeling, versus you trying to figure out what's happening with other people, right? It's really about you being present and connected to yourself.
So then let's talk about, because somebody watching this is going to say, yeah, so what? Mm-hmm. So, okay, so I feel good about myself. Nice. My job is to help these people, 2 or more people, figure out what they want to do about the conflict that they find themselves in. So they say, so what, Hansa? What does this really mean for me as a practitioner? How does this in any way enhance or improve my ability as a mediator? Or we'll talk maybe a bit about my ability as a lawyer. But my ability as how does it help me?
I think that's a really good question, Michael. And I can only speak for my own self, right? Sure. About how this works for me. And it might not work for other people. And it might work for some people. And some people might want to try it out. But for what I notice for myself is that when I can take a moment to be silent, to meditate, or just sit still, or to journal and reflect on what's happening for me as a mediator, it allows me to separate what we were talking about earlier, Michael, about what stuff is mine, you know, and creating space to be a little bit more neutral for the other party, where I'm not projecting my issues onto this couple, onto this conflict. I can maybe figure out, you know, this situation is kind of triggering for me, or this particular conflict is something I have history with, and I need to step back and make sure I can put that aside a little bit and not project it onto this conflict that I'm trying to manage. It helps with me identifying my bias, my judgments, my triggers, my assumptions. It allows me to create more space to be a neutral with the conflict that I'm trying to help facilitate. You know, have more open communication for these parties without me bringing my stuff onto them, you know, so that I can hear them better. So they can hear each other without me, you know, changing their picture in any way. Then I can be more neutral. You know, it allows me to put myself in check a little bit, you know. So for me, that's why it's important. If I want to be neutral and not be engaged in the conflict and create that space for them to have a dialogue about their conflict and empower them to resolve their conflict on their own, then I can't mix this up with my own stuff.
Right. And one of the things that's true about us, as much as we mediators talk about neutrality and absence of bias and so on, it is aspirational. It isn't, we can't avoid those conditions. We can't avoid those reactions. What we can do is ensure that they don't interfere with our work, that our reactions don't compromise the quality of our professional interactions with the people who've come to us.
Completely agree with you. You know, that this idea of neutrality is an idea, you know, and we all bring things to the table, and we need to do our best to manage them ourselves, you know, and be aware of them so that they have hopefully very minimal impact on the parties that we're working with, right?
See, I think it's really important also, and I appreciate your making this distinction or helping to make this distinction. A lot of people will have their own ideas about what meditation is and its purpose, and not just the varieties of ways in which people choose to meditate or the philosophies about it and the natures of those practices. But the common perception is that it is a self-loving, self-improving kind of thing that has sort of internal value, that it's intrinsic, that it doesn't really, that, you know, that I can meditate and feel good about myself, and then I can go out and I can do whatever my work is, disconnected from what I've just done in terms of meditation. And that's not what you're saying. That it does have, it may have for people, and for many it does have this calming, quieting, strengthening effect, that we can become stronger, more resilient as a human being as a result of meditation. And that can be its own reward. You're saying yes, and it can also have this effect in terms of my capacity as a practitioner to do my job, so that the end result is that parties have the best opportunity they can have with me to find the answers that they're searching for.
Absolutely. You know, I completely agree with you, Michael, that it has an amazing internal benefit, right? This mindfulness or meditation for me. And for some people, might not be their thing, and that's okay. It creates a sense of quietness and joy for me, but I love its impact on how I engage with other people. And how I engage with other people, like in mediation, for example, it changes the outcome.
Can you give an example of how it helps you be the kind of effective practitioner you would like to be?
All right, so something that I've been doing a lot of now is that before I start my mediation, I like to do a compassion mediation by myself, where I share happiness, joy, physical health with both sides of the party in my meditation, where I might say out loud, may A be happy, may B be happy, may A live life with ease, may B live life with ease. And I do that because, one, it helps me manage my own anxiety about how this mediation is going to go. And two, it allows me to sort of create compassion to both sides, so that if there is any bias, implicit bias on my end about either party's positions or roles they take in life, that I could neutralize them a little bit and treat them the same, and that just, for me, I do that for myself. And then when I arrive, I find myself to be a little bit more curious and open to hearing both sides, and kind of maybe push back judgments that I might have made or assumptions that I've made about one side already. And sometimes they're not so obvious, right? Because, we all like to think that we don't come with bias, but we do. And sometimes I don't even recognize them. And so it allows me a clean slate to work with when I arrive and talk to them. So what happens for me internally with me just managing my own needs impacts how I arrive, and it impacts how we all communicate with each other.
So when you sit down to begin, you've already done something that enhances your self-assurance, not your confidence about the outcome, not a pat on the back that says, I am a really great mediator, just watch me, but your confidence in your ability to be at your best for the people you're working with, to use the tools, the techniques, and the strategies that you've trained and you've practiced and you're adept at. And to not let the internal process for you, the inner dialogue that says, oh, I don't know, I don't really like this person very much. They're really loud, and brash, and difficult. And I'll give you an example. I'm not a speedy talker. I may talk quite a bit, but I talk fairly slowly. And one of my clients had a very large signet, some kind of a ring, and he would tap it on the table in nervousness. And he'd say, because he would talk like this, he was really very quick, and and he'd say, Michael, can we speed this up? The clock's running. And for me to be able to laugh at the situation, not at him, not at myself, but at the situation, and to just say to him, I'm doing this as fast as I can. I get it. I get that I wasn't defensive. In other words, that's the calm that I felt, the self-assurance that I felt allowed me to not feel defensive in response to his challenge to me to talk more quickly and to get this thing over with. Because after all, the solutions were pretty obvious, and time's money.
Well, I like the fact that you don't speak so quickly, because I do. I value that, because it allows me to really digest that and appreciate that. So thank you.
You're welcome. I find that people interrupt me a lot because I'm about to say something else, but I have paused. I know what I want to say, but my personal style is, I speak, and I pause for a sec, and then go on. And the fast talkers are are already on to the next topic. It's I just I've lived through this long enough. It doesn't faze me now, as it did when I was in my 20s.
Well, it's funny we should be talking about this today, because before our conversation today, I said to myself, wow, maybe one day I can communicate calmly as the way Michael does. He's not in a rush. He can really just be calm in his own skin. Maybe I'll be like that one day. So I had that thought today. I appreciate that. I do.
Thank
you. And to Michael, to answer this question you were saying about, does meditation make a person better? No. But you are right that what it does for me, it allows me to arrive at my best. And I meditate because I need it. Without it, I'm not my best. And I am more at my best when I meditate, and I am happier with how I have engaged with people, how I've communicated with folks. I'm less reactive and less triggered, or I become more aware of my triggers. So I would never say that a meditator is better than a non-meditator. But it is simply a tool on letting me arrive at my best.
And, I think what you've just said, and we're going to stop in just a minute, Hansa. I almost don't need to say anything because you've just said it, which is that it is a tool that you use and that others can use as well. But the point is not just what tool one uses, it's the purpose for which you use the tool that really matters. Because somebody else could find a different way to achieve what you're describing, and that is to be calm, focused, confident, curious, accessible, and to be mindful as well of what might shift us away from our ability to be neutral and unbiased, and therefore really helpful.
Yeah.
So I'm going to ask you one more question.
Okay,
There's a question. Well, that's a question within a question, which is there...
Should I be worried?
No, it's not a trick. I don't do trick questions, I hope. Is there anything about mindfulness or about meditation that you would have wanted me to ask that I didn't?
I think what I would say about it is anybody could do it, or you could choose not to do it. But I would also say that if you are interested or curious about it, that you could try it. And it is hard. It is hard, and it's meant to be hard. It's not supposed to be easy to sit still and tell the mind to stop thinking. It's a really hard thing to do. And I struggle with it every day still. And I think most meditators will tell you that. It's really hard for them too. But we just keep trying it. I think the important part is for you to figure out what allows you to be at your best when you arrive and are ready to engage with the world or ready to engage with your client. how you can stay curious, how we can stay open, how we can become more aware of our triggers, how we can just arrive and be happy about what we said or did tomorrow.
Hansa
Just
Patel.
one tool.
Hansa Patel, thank you so very much for the opportunity to talk with you today.
Michael, thank you very much for being so open and curious about my own experiences and my own journey with mindfulness and the law and mediation. Amazing, those three things. I really appreciate